Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into some, well, pretty significant and, frankly, troubling news. The big headline is Tory Lanez, the Canadian rapper. He's serving that 10-year sentence for the Megan Thee Stallion shooting.
Yeah.
Well, reports are saying he was attacked pretty brutally inside a California prison.
That's right. The details, or what we're hearing anyway, are coming out of the correctional institution in Tehachapi, California. This apparently happened around 7 a.m. In one of the housing units.
And the injuries they're reporting, it's shocking, really.
Yeah.
Initial reports mentioned 14 stab wounds, a double lung collapse.
Yeah.
Even stabbed in the head and face.
It's awful. Thankfully, last we heard, his condition was described as fair after hospitalization, but still.
Absolutely. Okay, so we need to kind of unpack this.
Yeah.
Because this incident, it really casts a different light maybe on the original case itself. And that's where things get, well, complicated based on some of the information we've looked at.
Exactly, because, the narrative that solidified was that Mr. Peterson, Tory Lanez, was guilty. But this other material we reviewed, it paints, a starkly different picture.
Right.
It raises some pretty serious questions, I think, about how fair that outcome really was. It kind of shows how easily these narratives stick, doesn't it? Especially with high-profile cases, even if there's conflicting stuff out there.
It really does. And this other information, it actually suggests, the possibility that Tory Lanez might be innocent. Brings up this claim that another woman in the car, someone named Kezio, that she might have been the one who actually fired the gun.
And what's really interesting there is this witness they mention, a guy named James.
Okay.
So this account claims James actually heard Miss Harris. Now, whether she's the same person as Kezio isn't totally clear, but he heard Miss Harris say she had the gun.
Wow.
And that she fired it 3 times.
Okay, wait. So James's account goes even further than that.
It does. He claims that after those first 3 shots, that's when Mr. Peterson, Tory Lanez, stepped in. Right.
Grabbed her arm, apparently, and then the gun went off 2 more times.
So the huge implication there, is that Lanez never actually fired it himself.
According to this testimony, yeah. Never fired it, maybe never even touched it before that moment he intervened.
But, how solid is this witness, James? Has this been checked out? Are there, biases we should think about here?
Those are definitely the right questions. And this material we're looking at, it also brings up another witness, Sean Kelly.
Okay.
He's described as a non-party witness. So basically, someone with no direct stake in it all, which, could make his testimony seem more impartial.
And what did Kelly say?
Well, his account apparently backs up this alternative story. He reportedly saw 2 women fighting.
Fighting, okay.
And crucially, he said the gunshots came from the passenger side of the car.
Which is where Miss Harris was supposed to be sitting, right?
Exactly where she was reportedly sitting. Huh. Okay, and if that wasn't enough to make you question things, this info also points out something about the DNA evidence. Or lack thereof.
Yeah, this is pretty key.
Apparently, even though there were 3 people in that car who could have, potentially been involved.
Right.
DNA samples were reportedly only taken from Mr. Peterson, from Tory Lanez.
Yeah.
Is that normal? Wouldn't you usually collect DNA from everyone there in a situation like that? What does it mean if they didn't? Was it just an oversight?
It certainly makes you wonder about how thorough the investigation really was, at least as it's presented here. When you line it all up, you've got witness testimony potentially pointing to someone else, another witness maybe backing that up, and then this seemingly limited forensic work.
Yeah.
It really creates a picture that, it just doesn't fit with the conviction.
And now, layer on top of that this news, these reports about him being attacked in prison.
Right. It adds another really disturbing dimension.
And the source material we looked at does touch on that, the dangers inside prison. Especially, it seems, for inmates who are well known.
Yeah, it mentions prison politics and how violence levels can really vary depending on the facility. Federal versus state, different security levels.
Higher security levels being potentially more dangerous.
That seems to be the suggestion. And it brings up a specific point about inmates doing life sentences.
Oh.
The perspective offered in the source is that, someone facing life might have a totally different view on violence inside. Maybe fewer perceived consequences for their actions,
That makes a grim kind of sense.
And this vulnerability, this danger, it's not just about famous people. It connects to this wider, deeply concerning issue of people potentially locked up for crimes they just didn't commit.
Which brings us to that other story in the material, Vincent Simmons.
Yeah, what a story. Truly heartbreaking.
Unbelievable. This information details his case. Vincent Simmons imprisoned for, what was it, 44 years.
44 years for a crime he always said he didn't do.
And the details around his conviction, as laid out here, they are just deeply, deeply troubling.
Right. Accused of rape back in 1977 by twin sisters. Then, a relative of the twins who happened to be a sheriff
Oh, wow.
arrests him and allegedly beats a confession out of him. Physical abuse to get a confession.
That's horrific. And then the lineup issues.
Yeah, that's another major red flag. During the police lineup, Mr. Simmons was apparently the only one in handcuffs.
Seriously, how was that even allowed?
It gets worse. This material quotes one of the sisters actually admitting in a police interview later. She said she couldn't identify the attacker because, quote, all black people looked the same to her.
Oh, my God. It just echoes what you were saying about flawed investigations, doesn't it? Overlooked steps, mishandled procedures with just devastating results.
Absolutely horrifying. And then you find out the reason they allegedly made it all up.
What was it?
The information we have suggests the twins basically fabricated the whole rape story
Okay.
to hide the fact that one of them was having a relationship with their cousin. You're kidding.
Yeah.
So a lie to cover that up led to a man losing 44 years of his life.
44 years gone. And the source makes a really poignant point. Even after his sentence was finally overturned, what real recourse does someone like Vincent Simmons have?
Right.
How do you even begin to compensate for that kind of injustice, for those lost decades? Often there's no adequate way.
Which just circles us right back to Tory Lanez and this disturbing news about the alleged stabbing.
Mm-hmm.
Him being attacked in prison, while at the same time, this other information keeps surfacing, suggesting he might actually be innocent of the crime that put him there.
Yeah.
It tragically mirrors the kind of potential injustice we see in Vincent Simmons' story. Completely different circumstances, obviously, decades apart,
But both highlighting these potential cracks, these really complex issues within the justice system.
So it leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty significant question, I think. When you consider all this information about the Tory Lanez case, the challenges to the official story, and then you hear about the absolute tragedy of Vincent Simmons spending 44 years locked up wrongly.
Yeah.
What does that really tell us about how complicated our justice system can be? About the difficulties in actually getting to the truth sometimes? And maybe what responsibility do we have, as individuals, as a society, especially when new information comes out that really shakes up what we thought we knew?